Captain Hana pushed through the thick crowd of aliens in the smoky cantina on Station 7. The air was heavy with strange smells from a dozen different worlds, mixed with the sound of clicking claws scraping metal and voices speaking in languages that hurt human ears to hear. The cantina was the biggest meeting place in this part of the galaxy, where traders and mercenaries came to drink and make deals. At the center table sat the largest creature Hana had ever seen, up close, a massive Grokon, warrior named Vex. His purple scales caught the harsh light from overhead. His 4 muscular arms were each bigger than Hana's entire body. When he laughed, the sound was like rocks grinding together. His yellow eyes glowed with mean satisfaction as he told his story. Around Vex sat creatures from across the known galaxy. The insect, like hive minds, clicked their approval with sharp mandibles. Their black compound eyes reflected the light like broken mirrors. The gaseous nebulon beings floated, in their containment suits, pulsing with colors that showed their emotions. Right now, those colors were the deep red of amusement. Even the crystal folk who usually stayed neutral in arguments between other species were shimmering with what looked like agreement. Hana stood at the bar, listening to every word Vex was saying. Her friend June stood next to her. His dark hair was messy from running his hands through it. He did that. When he was nervous, June had been her friend since childhood back on Earth. Colony New Soul. They had joined the Merchant Marine together and now served on the same cargo ship. Vex slammed all 4 of his massive fists on the metal table. The sound rang through the cantina like a bell. Everyone stopped talking, too. Listen to him. His voice was deep and rough like stones falling down a mountain. Your humans are the weakest race in this galaxy, Vex said with a nasty grin. You talk big about being tough and smart, but when real danger comes, you break like thin glass. No human has ever survived even one night on Deathward Prime, the most dangerous planet in known space. The aliens around his table made sounds of agreement. The hive minds clicked faster. The nebulons pulsed brighter. Even some of the smaller aliens, who usually stayed quiet, were nodding their heads or making whatever gesture their species used to show. They agreed. Hana felt her hands make fists at her sides. She had heard this kind of talk before. Everywhere humans went in the galaxy, the aliens treated them like they were weak and stupid. They cheated humans in trade deals. They refused to let human ships dock at the best stations. They acted like humans did not belong among the stars. June saw the look on Hana's face and grabbed her arm. Gently, Hana, don't listen to them, he whispered close to her ear. They just want to make trouble. Deathward Prime is a real place, and it's really as bad as they say. The last 50 beings who tried to survive there all died. Nobody knows what killed them. But they never came back. But Hana was not listening to June anymore. She was thinking about all the times aliens had looked down on humans, all the times they had been treated like second-class citizens in their own galaxy, all the times someone had said humans were too soft, too weak, too stupid to survive out here among the real spacefaring races. She started walking toward Vex's table. Her boots made sharp clicking sounds on the metal floor that cut through the noise of the cantina conversations. Stopped as she moved through the crowd, aliens turned to watch her. Some moved out of her way. Others leaned in closer to see what would happen. The cantina got quieter with each step she took. Even the background hum of the air recycling system seemed louder now. By the time she reached Vex's table, you could have heard a pin drop. The only sounds were the soft hiss of the nebulon's breathing apparatus and the gentle chime of the crystal folk shifting in their seats. Hana stopped right in front of the massive Grokan warrior. She was not even half his height, but she stood straight and looked directly into his glowing yellow eyes. Her voice was calm and steady when she spoke. "What exactly did you say about humans?" she asked. Vex looked down at her and laughed again. The sound was even uglier up close. He showed rows of teeth that looked like they could bite through metal. Each tooth was the size of Hana's thumb and sharp as a knife. "I said your pathetic species is weak," he replied, leaning forward, so his massive head was closer to hers. Deathward Prime is a world that kills everything that tries to live on it. The weather can melt steel armor. The creatures hunt in packs and never sleep. The very air will burn your lungs if you breathe. The gravity is 3 times heavier than your soft little homeworld. Vex gestured with one of his massive arms toward the other aliens at his table. They all make bets about how long different species can survive on Deathward Prime. The record. Holder was a crystalline warrior who lasted almost 6 hours before something tore him apart. No human would last even half that long. Your kind is too soft, too slow, and too stupid. The insults hit Hana like physical blows, but instead of making her angry, they made her cold and focused. She had trained for years to be a starship captain. She had studied military tactics and survival skills. She had faced pirates and smugglers and dangerous cargo runs through asteroid fields. She was not going to let this oversized lizard insult her entire species. Hana smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile predators make right before they strike. "Want to bet on that?" she said quietly. The entire cantina erupted in shocked sounds. Aliens gasped, clicked, chittered, and made whatever noise showed surprise in their species. Even the bartender, a 6-armed Octarian, dropped the glass he was cleaning. It shattered on the floor behind the bar with a sound like breaking ice. Several aliens started talking at once in their own languages. The words were different, but the tone was the same in all of them. Nobody had ever volunteered to go to Deathward Prime before everyone knew it was a death sentence. Vex stared at Hana for a long moment. His yellow eyes got brighter as he realized what she was suggesting. "You want to go to Deathward Prime," he said slowly. "Like you could actually survive there." "Yes," Hana replied. "I do. And I will." Vex leaned back in his chair, making it creak. Under his massive weight, his grin got wider and more cruel. "Fine little human. If you somehow manage to survive 1 full night on that nightmare world, I will give you my personal war trophy collection. It's worth more than most starships." He gestured toward a display case behind the bar where his trophies were kept, weapons and armor pieces from dozens of defeated enemies. Each piece was worth a fortune, but together they represented the respect of one of the galaxy's most feared warriors. "And if you don't survive," Vex continued, his voice getting nastier, "then every human in this sector becomes a laughingstock. Your entire species loses all respect among the civilized races. Everyone will know that humans are nothing but weak cowards who talk big, but die easy." Hana looked around the cantina at all the alien faces watching her. Some looked curious, some looked amused, a few even looked worried, but most of them looked like they were already planning how they would spread the story of the stupid human who got herself killed trying to prove something. She thought about her crew back on the Thunder Wing. She thought about all the human colonies struggling to find their place among the older alien civilizations. She thought about every human child who would grow up being treated like a second-class citizen if she failed. But she also thought about what would happen if she succeeded. If she could prove that humans were not weak. If she could show the galaxy that her species deserved respect. Deal, Hana said clearly, so everyone in the cantina could hear her. The sound that followed was like nothing she had ever heard before. Dozens of different alien voices, all making sounds of shock, excitement, and disbelief. The cantina erupted into chaos as everyone started talking at once. Some aliens were already placing bets on how long she would survive. Others were calling friends on other stations to spread the news. Vex stood up to his full height, towering over Hana like a mountain of scales and muscle. He extended one massive hand and Hana shook it. Her hand disappeared completely in his grip, but she did not flinch or show any sign of fear. "Tomorrow at dawn," he said, "you have one standard day to prepare. Then a shuttle, takes you to Deathward Prime. You stay for one full night from sunset to sunrise. If you survive, you win. If you don't, well, there won't be enough left of you to bury." Hana nodded once, then turned and walked back through the crowd toward the exit. June followed her, his face pale with worry. The aliens parted to let them pass, but she could feel hundreds of eyes watching her every step. As they reached the door, Hana heard Vex call out behind her. "Hey, human! What makes you think you can survive where? 50 others have failed." Hana stopped and looked back over her shoulder at the massive warrior and all the aliens surrounding him, because she said simply, "I'm human, and humans don't give up." Then she walked out into the corridor, leaving behind a cantina, full of aliens who were about to learn something new about the species they had always underestimated. The Thunderwing cargo ship floated in the darkness of space near Station 7. Captain Hana stood in the main cargo bay surrounded by her crew. They all thought she had lost her mind. The metal walls echoed with their worried voices as they tried to talk her out of the suicide mission she had just accepted. Her engineer Day paced back and forth across the cargo bay floor. His black hair was messy from running his hands through it over and over again. "Captain, this is crazy," he said. "For the 10th time in 5 minutes, I pulled up all the data we have on Deathward Prime. The numbers are terrifying. Dr. Nari, the ship's medical officer, activated the holographic display system. Images of Deathward Prime filled the air around them. The planet looked like something from a nightmare. Swirling storms covered half the surface. Active volcanoes glowed like angry red eyes. The atmosphere readings showed toxic gases that would kill most life forms in minutes. Look at these temperature readings," Dr. Nari said, pointing at the data. "The surface goes from freezing cold to boiling hot every few hours. The weather changes so fast that most protective suits can't adapt quickly enough. The electromagnetic storms are so strong they can fry electronic. Equipment from Orbit Day pulled up more data showing the planet's gravity readings. It's 3 times heavier than Earth," he said. "That means everything you do will be 3 times harder. Just walking will feel like carrying 2 other people on your back. Your heart will have to work 3 times as hard just to pump blood." The ship's pilot, Quan, was the youngest member of the crew. He looked scared as he read through the casualty reports. Captain, 50 beings have tried to survive on Deathward Prime in the last 20 years, he said quietly. All of them died. The reports say some of them were legendary warriors from the toughest species in the galaxy. If they couldn't survive, how can you, Hana, listen to all their concerns? But she was already working on her plan. She had spent the last 6 hours studying every piece of information they could find about Deathward Prime. Most of it was just stories and rumors because very few people had ever gotten close enough to study the planet properly. But there were some scientific surveys and a few reports from the failed challengers. The problem is that everyone who went there made the same mistakes, Hana said as she pulled up the tactical analysis she had been working on. They all tried to fight the planet instead of working with it. June looked confused. "What do you mean, Captain?" "They brought heavy armor and big weapons," Hana explained, pointing to images of the previous challengers' equipment. "They tried to set up fortified camps and fight against everything they encountered, but you can't win a war against an entire planet." She showed them the equipment loadouts from previous attempts, massive battle suits that weighed hundreds of pounds, high-energy weapons that needed constant, power-heavy shelters that took hours to set up emergency beacons that got destroyed by the electromagnetic storms. "But humans don't win through brute force," Hana continued. "We win through adaptation. We survive by being smart and flexible, not by being the biggest or strongest." Over the next 3 days, Hana prepared for her mission in a completely different way than any previous challenger. Instead of heavy armor, she chose a lightweight environmental suit that could regulate temperature quickly. The suit was designed for exploration, not combat, but it was flexible and had multiple backup systems. Instead of massive weapons, she picked tools that could serve many purposes. A plasma cutter that could be used as a weapon or to cut through obstacles. a grappling system that could help her climb or be used to set traps, a medical kit that included emergency stimulants and painkillers. Most importantly, she did something no previous challenger had thought to do. She studied the planet's ecosystem, not just its dangers. Every world, no matter how deadly, had patterns and rhythms. If she could understand how Deathward Prime worked, she might be able to predict where the dangers would come from. Dr. Nari helped her prepare physically for the heavy gravity. They set up a training program using the ship's artificial gravity generators. Hana spent hours each day exercising under increased gravity until she could move normally at twice normal weight. It was exhausting, but she could feel herself. Getting stronger, Day worked on her equipment, making sure everything was as reliable as possible. He installed backup power systems and redundant life support. He even built a small emergency shelter that could be set up in minutes instead of hours. Quan studied the orbital mechanics of Deathward Prime. The planet had 3 moons, and the gravitational interactions created unpredictable weather patterns. But there were brief windows of calmer weather that lasted just long enough for a shuttle to land and take off. On the morning of her departure, the entire crew gathered in the cargo bay to see her off. Hana was already wearing her environmental suit and checking her equipment one final time. The suit felt strange after wearing normal clothes. For so long, but she had practiced with it enough that the movements felt natural. "Captain, you don't have to do this," Dr. Nari said. Her voice was quiet, but everyone could hear the worry in it. Those aliens will always find new reasons to look down on humans. Even if you survive, they will just say it was luck. Hana sealed her helmet and activated the suit systems. The display inside showed her vital signs, environmental readings, and equipment status. Everything was working perfectly. She looked at her crew through the helmet's visor and saw her own determination reflected in their faces. "Yes, I do have to do this," she said. The suit's communication system made her voice sound metallic but clear. "Not just for me, but for every human who is tired of being treated like we don't belong out here among the stars." She thought about all the human colonies struggling to trade with alien worlds, all the human children who would grow up being told they were weak and stupid, all the human explorers, and scientists whose discoveries were ignored because they came from an inferior species. "We are not inferior," Hana continued. "We are different, and sometimes being different is exactly what you need." To survive, June came over and checked her equipment one more time, even though they had already checked it 3 times. "Your extraction beacon is set for 24 hours from landing," he said. "The shuttle will come for you at sunrise, whether you signal or not. Just stay alive until then." Hana nodded and picked up her equipment pack. It was much lighter than what previous challengers had carried, but she had chosen every item carefully. Each piece of gear had to serve multiple purposes and be reliable under extreme conditions. The Thunder Wing approached Deathward Prime as the local star was setting. The planet filled the view screen like a jewel made of death, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The surface glowed with volcanic activity, and massive storms swirled across the continents. 3 moons hung in the sky, casting strange shadows across the landscape. "Dropping in 10 minutes, Captain Quan announced over the comm system. His voice was steady, but Hana could hear the tension underneath. The cargo bay fell silent as Hana climbed into the drop pod. It was a small, cramped space, barely big enough for one person and their equipment. The pod was designed to get through the planet's dangerous atmosphere quickly before the storms could destroy it. 5 minutes, Captain Quan called. Out Hana took a deep breath and thought about everything that had led to this moment. All the times aliens had called humans weak. All the trade deals where humans got cheated. All the doors that stayed closed to human explorers and diplomats. 2 minutes. She thought about her crew watching from the safety of orbit. She thought about Vex and his collection of trophies waiting for her to fail. She thought about every human in the galaxy who would hear the story of what happened next. 1 minute. Captain Goodluck Hana gripped the drop pod's control handles and prepared to face the most dangerous night of her life. She was about to find out if humans really were as weak as the galaxy thought, or if they had been underestimating her species. All along pod away, Quan announced. The drop pod fell toward Deathward Prime like a meteor, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire species toward a world that had never let anyone leave alive. The drop pod hit the surface of Deathward Prime like a hammer striking an anvil. The impact threw Hana against the restraints hard enough to bruise her ribs, even through the padding. The pod skidded across rocky ground for 50 meters before finally coming to rest in a cloud of dust and steam. Hana waited for the dust to settle before opening the pod hatch. The first thing that hit her was the gravity. It felt like invisible hands were trying to crush her into the ground. Every movement took 3 times as much effort as normal. Just lifting her arm felt like lifting weights. Her environmental suit immediately started screaming warnings. The outside air was toxic enough to kill her in minutes. The radiation levels were dangerous. The temperature was dropping fast as night fell. And that was just the beginning. She climbed out of the pod and got her first real look at Deathward Prime. The landscape looked like something from a nightmare. Jagged crystal formations jutted up from the ground. Like broken teeth, some of them taller than buildings. In the distance, she could see geysers of green acid shooting hundreds of feet into the air. The sky was a sickly yellow color, and 3 moons hung overhead like watching eyes. Her first priority was finding shelter. The temperature readings on her suit showed it would drop to deadly levels within an hour. She had studied the geological surveys and knew there was a lava tube entrance about 1 kilometer away. Underground tunnels that might provide protection from the surface storms. Hana started moving toward the lava tubes, but every step was carefully planned. The ground was unstable with hidden cracks that could drop her into underground chambers filled with poisonous gas. She had read the failure reports and knew that previous challengers had rushed across the surface, making noise and attracting attention. She moved slowly and quietly, testing each step before putting her full weight down. The heavy gravity made her clumsy, but she forced herself to be patient. One wrong step could end her mission before it really started. That was when she met her first Deathward predator. The creature emerged from behind a crystal formation, and Hana's blood turned to ice. It was huge, the size of a ground transport vehicle with 6 legs that ended in claws like sword blades. Its hide was covered in natural armor plates that looked like they could stop bullets. Its head had too many eyes and too many teeth, all of them focused on her. The beast circled her slowly, its multiple eyes reflecting the strange light from the moons above. Hana recognized it from the survey reports. The locals called them rock stalkers, pack hunters with incredible speed and intelligence. Fighting. One was useless, because where there was one, there were always more hiding nearby. According to the reports, rock stalkers had killed at least 12 of the previous challengers. They were patient predators that would stalk their prey for hours before, attacking in coordinated groups. The smart thing to do would be to run, but Hana knew she could never outrun them in the heavy gravity. Instead of running or fighting, Hana did something that no previous challenger had tried. She stood perfectly still and observed the creature. The rockstalker's movements were not random. It was testing her, trying to figure out what kind of prey she was. Its body language showed caution, not pure aggression. This creature had never seen a human before and was not sure what she was capable of. Hana watched the way it moved its head, the position of its ears, the tension in its muscles. Everything about its behavior suggested it was more curious than hungry. It was treating her like an unknown quantity, not like food. Slowly, very slowly, Hana reached into her pack and pulled out one of her emergency ration bars. The movement made the rock stalker tense up, ready to attack, but she kept her motions calm and deliberate. She tossed the ration bar to one side away, from both herself and the creature. The rockstalker's head snapped toward the movement, then back to her. Its nostrils flared as it caught the scent of the ration. The protein bars were designed to be appealing to a wide range of life forms in case of emergency situations. For a long moment, they stared at each other. The rockstalker was clearly trying to decide if she was a threat or just another strange creature wandering through its territory. Then slowly, it moved toward the ration bar, sniffed it carefully, and took a cautious bite. The creature's eyes widened in what looked like surprise. The ration bar contained proteins and nutrients that were apparently delicious to the local wildlife. It looked back at Hana with what she could only describe as gratitude, then picked up the rest of the ration and retreated behind the crystal formation. Hana took a step backward, then another. The rockstalker let her go, more interested in the unexpected treat than in hunting her. She had learned something important about Deathward Prime. The predators were not mindlessly aggressive. They were intelligent creatures that could be reasoned with. The lava tube entrance was exactly where the geological surveys had said it would be. A dark opening in the ground that led down into the planet's underground network. The tunnels had been carved by ancient volcanic activity and might provide protection from the surface dangers. Hana activated her suit's lighting system and began descending into the tunnels. The air down here was warmer, filtered through miles of rock and heated by geothermal activity. Her suit sensors showed that it was actually breathable, though she kept her helmet sealed just to be safe. The tunnels were larger than she had expected. Some of them were wide enough to drive a vehicle through. The walls showed signs of volcanic activity, but also something else, tool marks, as if someone had deliberately expanded and modified the natural cave system as she went deeper. Hana began to hear sounds echoing through the tunnels, scraping and clicking noises that suggested she was not alone down here. But there was something else, too, a rhythmic sound that was almost like singing. The singing got louder as she followed. The main tunnel deeper into the planet. It was not quite music, but it had pattern and melody. Following the sound, she found herself approaching a faint glow coming from somewhere ahead. What she discovered when she rounded the next corner changed everything she thought she knew about Deathward Prime. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber the size of a stadium. Bridges made of carved stone spanned across underground rivers of warm water. Gardens of strange glowing plants provided light and what looked like food. And everywhere moving through this underground city were creatures she had never seen before. They looked like a cross between humans and insects, with long, thin limbs and large, intelligent eyes. Their skin had a chitinous quality, but they moved with grace and purpose. Some of them were tending the glowing gardens, others were working on structures carved directly from the living rock. It was a civilization, an entire city hidden beneath the deadly surface of Deathward Prime. Singing stopped as they noticed her arrival. Dozens of the beings gathered around, chattering in their musical language. Some of them pointed at her with excitement. Others seemed more cautious. Hana raised her hands slowly, showing that she meant no harm. One of them approached her, a tall individual with intricate patterns carved into its natural armor. It spoke in broken standard, the common trade language used throughout the galaxy, Skywalker. It said its voice like wind chimes. You are different from the others. The ones who came before brought loud machines and bright lights. They tried to conquer the surface, and always died. Hana removed her helmet carefully. The gesture of trust had an immediate effect. The creatures relaxed, and several came closer to examine her more carefully. I am human, she said. Speaking slowly and clearly, I came here to prove that my people can survive on your world. The tall being, who seemed to be some kind of leader, tilted its head in a gesture that looked almost humans survive, it said. Foolish. The surface is the place of death. We live below where the world is kind to us. Through broken conversation and careful gestures, Hana began to learn the truth about Deathward Prime. The surface was indeed deadly, a wasteland of extreme weather and dangerous predators. But the real life, the real civilization, existed underground in a vast network of habitable tunnels and chambers. The underground dwellers called themselves the Deep Folk, and they had been watching. Surface challengers die for decades. They never interfered because the challengers always came with weapons and hostile intentions, trying to conquer the planet instead of understanding it. You are different, the leader explained. You came quietly. You respected the Rockstalker. You fed it instead of fighting it. As Hana looked around at their underground city, she realized she had stumbled onto something incredible. The Deep Folk had technology, but not the kind that most spacefaring races used. Their tools were living things bred and trained for specific purposes. Their buildings regulated temperature and air automatically. Would you like to see more? The leader asked, and for the first time since landing on Deathward Prime, Hana began to think she might actually survive the night. The Deep Folk leader, who introduced himself as Rootsinger, guided Hana through their underground city. She had never seen anything like it. The caverns stretched out in all directions, connected by bridges and walkways carved from the living rock. Water flowed through channels that had been shaped to create gentle waterfalls and peaceful pools. Everywhere she looked, there were signs of a civilization that had learned to work with their environment instead of fighting against it. The walls themselves seemed to glow with a soft light that came from colonies of bioluminescent organisms. Gardens of strange plants provided food and clean air. Creatures that looked like a cross between fish and birds swam through the air, currents carrying messages between different parts of the city. Your people have lived here for a long time, Hana said as they walked across a bridge made from what looked like grown crystal. Many generations. Rootsinger replied in his musical voice. We came here when the surface became too dangerous. Our ancestors learned to live with the deep places of the world instead of trying to make war with them. As they explored the city, Hana began to understand why so many previous challengers had died on the surface. They had all been trying to survive in the wrong place. Deathward Prime was not just a hostile world, it was a protected sanctuary. The real civilization existed underground where the environment was stable and safe. The Deep Folk showed her chambers, filled with technology that grew instead of being built. Living computers made from modified coral that could process information faster than most electronic systems. Tools that repaired themselves when damaged. Vehicles that moved through the tunnels, like fish swimming through water. But what really caught Hana's attention were the storage chambers. Rootsinger led her to a vast room filled with artifacts from the surface, equipment, weapons, and personal belongings from dozens of different species, all carefully preserved and cataloged. We honor the fallen, Rootsinger explained, gesturing to the collection. Their belongings tell us stories about the worlds they came from and the people they left behind. Hana walked through the collection, recognizing some of the equipment from the casualty reports she had studied. There were weapons from the legendary Groken warriors, armor from the crystal-based Silicon Empire technology from races she had never even heard of. But as she looked closer, she noticed something else. Mixed in with the artifacts from dead challengers were trophies that told a different story. Pieces of armor that had been deliberately taken from defeated enemies. Weapons that showed signs of being used in successful battles. Evidence that the Deep Folk were capable fighters when they needed to be. Singer noticed her studying the trophy collection. Sometimes beings come to our world with bad intentions, he said quietly. They try to strip mine our tunnels or capture our people for slaves. When that happens, we defend ourselves. The trophies included items from some of the galaxy's most feared warrior races. Armor pieces from Void Hunters who were supposed to be unstoppable, weapons from the Machine Collective whose drones had conquered entire star systems, evidence that the gentle-looking deep folk had successfully fought off threats that most civilizations could not handle. "How many of your people live down here?" Hana asked Root Singer, made a gesture that seemed to indicate vast numbers, "Many thousands in this city alone," he said. "And there are other cities connected by the deep tunnels. We are not a small people. Skywalker. We are simply a hidden one." As they continued exploring, Hana learned more about deep folk society. They were organized into family groups that specialized in different skills. Some were builders who shaped the living rock into new structures. Others were gardeners who cultivated the food plants and light organisms. Still others were warriors who protected the tunnels from surface threats. "The night passes above," Root Singer said as they returned to the main chamber. "You are safe here until the sunrise. But dawn brings new dangers. The day hunters are more fierce than the night stalkers." Hana realized that surviving the night was only half the challenge. She still had to make it back to the surface and signal for extraction, but now she had allies, and more importantly, she understood the real nature of Deathward Prime. This planet was not just a death world, it was a fortress. The deep folk used the deadly reputation of the surface to protect their civilization from interference. They had been happy to let the galaxy believe that nothing could survive on Deathward Prime because it kept the truly dangerous visitors away. But Root Singer had a proposal. The deep folk had been watching the galaxy's various species send challengers to their world for decades. They were tired of cleaning up the mess and wanted it to stop. If Hana could prove that humans were different, that they could be trusted, the deep folk would give her something that would shock the entire galaxy. "We will give you proof that the surface can be survived," Root Singer said, gesturing toward a chamber filled with trophies. "But you must earn it. The morning test will be different from what others have faced." The challenge was this. Hana had to reach the surface and make it to her extraction point while being hunted by the planet's day predators. But she would not be alone. A group of young deep folk warriors would accompany her, testing her leadership and combat skills. If she could prove that humans were natural allies rather than conquerors, the deep folk would give her trophies from their collection, proof that she had not only survived Deathward Prime, but had succeeded where all others had failed. The war party that Root Singer assembled consisted of 5 deep folk warriors, each with different specializations. Quick Strike was their scout, who could move across dangerous terrain like water flowing over rocks. Stonebreaker was their heavy combat specialist, carrying weapons grown from the planet's crystal formations. Soft Voice could communicate with the local wildlife and track movement. Across great distances, Windwalker was their climbing expert who could scale vertical surfaces that would be impossible for most species, and Dreamkeeper was their strategist who would judge whether Hana was worthy of their trust as they prepared for the surface mission. Hana learned that the deep folk were not just the planet's inhabitants, they were its immune system. They protected Deathward Prime from exploitation and invasion using the world's deadly reputation as their first line of defense. "Your people have been watching us fail for decades," she said to Root Singer. "Why help me now?" "Because you came differently," Root Singer replied. "You did not try to conquer. You observed. You adapted. You fed the rock stalker instead of fighting. These are the actions of someone who might understand that some worlds are meant to be protected, not exploited." The deep folk warriors finished their preparations as the first light of dawn began to filter down through cracks in the tunnel ceiling. The surface would be waking up soon, and with it the day hunters that were supposedly even more dangerous than the creatures of the night. "Are you ready?" Skywalker Dreamkeeper asked. The strategist had been watching Hana carefully throughout the night, studying her reactions and decisions. Hana checked her equipment one final time. The lightweight gear that her crew had thought was insufficient now seemed perfect for what lay ahead. She was not going to fight Deathward Prime, she was going to work with it. "I am ready," she said. "Then let us see if humans truly deserve to walk among the stars." Dreamkeeper replied. Together, the mixed group of human and deep folk warriors began their ascent toward the deadly surface where Hana would face the final test of her mission. The sun was rising on Deathward Prime, and with it came predators that had never tasted human blood. But this time they would face more than just a lone, desperate challenger. They would face a coordinated team led by someone who had learned the most important lesson about survival. Sometimes the key to conquering a world is not to conquer it at all, but to earn the right to be welcomed into it. The first light of Deathward Prime's violent sunrise cut through the tunnel entrance like a sword made of fire. Hana and the 5 deep folk warriors gathered at the underground city's main exit, preparing for the most dangerous part of her mission. The temperature readings on her environmental suit were already climbing toward deadly levels. Root Singer stood with them, giving final instructions to his warriors. Surface awakens hungry. He warned, his musical voice serious. The Day Hunters are more organized than Night Stalkers. They use pack tactics and have learned to work together against prey Hana. Checked her equipment one more time. The lightweight gear that had seemed so inadequate compared to previous challengers, heavy armor now, felt perfect for what they were about to face. She would need to be fast and flexible, not heavily protected, quick strike. The deep folk scout moved to the tunnel entrance and peered out at the surface. His large eyes were adapted for seeing in the strange light of Deathward Prime. 3 sky. Ripper pack circling the area. He reported, "They know something is different." Today, Stonebreaker hefted his crystal weapons grown from the planet's own mineral formations. The heavy combat specialist was nearly as large as the rock stalkers they had encountered the night before. His natural armor gleamed with an inner light that seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. The plan was simple but dangerous. They had to cross 2 kilometers of open terrain to reach Hana's extraction point. The ground was mostly flat but dotted with crystal formations that could provide cover. The real danger would come from above, where the Day Hunters ruled the skies. Ready Skywalker Dreamkeeper asked the strategist. Had been watching Hana all night, judging her decisions and reactions. Now came the final test. Hana activated her suit's combat systems and checked the power levels on her plasma cutter. Everything was working perfectly. Her crew had done their job. Well, the equipment was reliable and ready for whatever they would face. "Ready," she replied. The war party emerged from the tunnels into the blazing heat of Deathward Prime's day. The gravity hit Hana like a physical blow, but she had trained for this. The deep folk moved easily in the heavy gravity since they had evolved here, but Hana had to force herself to keep up. The landscape looked completely different in daylight. What had seemed like a nightmare of jagged rocks and acid pools the night before now revealed itself as something more complex. The crystal formations were arranged in patterns that suggested they were not entirely natural. The deep folk had been shaping their world's surface for generations. They had traveled less than 100 meters when the first attack came. Sky Rippers emerged from behind the largest crystal formation, diving toward them with incredible speed. The flying predators had wingspans wider than shuttles and beaks that could punch through armor. Their hunting cry sounded like metal being torn apart. But this time was different. Instead of a lone challenger trying to survive through desperation, the Sky Rippers faced a coordinated team. Quick Strike immediately scattered, leading 2 of the flying predators away from the main group. His movements were fluid and graceful, using the crystal formations to break up their attack patterns. The scout could change direction instantly, using techniques that would be impossible for most species stone. Breaker planted himself in a defensive position and began firing his crystal weapons at the diving Sky Rippers. The weapons fired projectiles that exploded into clouds of sharp fragments that could shred wing membranes. The heavy warrior was like a living fortress protecting the rest of the team. Soft voice began making musical calls that echoed across the landscape. Within minutes, ground predators began emerging from hidden caves and crevices, the rock stalkers that Hana had encountered. The night before came running toward the battle, drawn by the promise of an easy meal from wounded Sky Rippers. Wind Walker used his climbing gear to scale a tall crystal formation, giving him a perfect vantage point to coordinate the battle. His calls guided the other warriors' movements, ensuring they stayed in formation, and Hana found herself doing what she did best. Leading a team in combat, her military training took over as she directed the Deep Folk warriors. The Sky Rippers were used to fighting lone desperate prey, not organized resistance. She used the crystal formations to channel their attacks into killing zones, where Stonebreaker's weapons were most effective. When one Sky Ripper managed to get through their defenses, Hana met it with her plasma cutter. The tool was not designed as a weapon, but it could cut through the creature's armored hide. The Sky Ripper screamed and pulled away, trailing green blood. The battle lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours when it was over 3. Sky Rippers lay dead on the crystal-strewn ground. The rest had fled to find easier prey. The Deep Folk warriors looked at Hana with new respect. "You fight with your mind, not just your weapons." Dreamkeeper observed, "You make the pack stronger instead of weaker." They continued toward the extraction point, but the journey was far from over. 2 more predator packs attacked them along the way. Each time, Hana proved that humans brought something unique to combat: the ability to think tactically and adapt quickly to changing situations. The second attack came from tunnel worms, massive serpentine creatures that erupted from underground without warning. They were longer than trains and covered in natural armor that could deflect most weapons. But Hana noticed that they always attacked in the same pattern, following underground channels that were visible if you knew what to look for. She directed the team to cross the dangerous area in a specific formation that avoided the worm tunnels. When the creatures attacked, they found empty ground instead of prey. The frustrated tunnel worms began fighting each other over territory, while the war party slipped past unnoticed. The third attack was the most dangerous: acid spitters, that could dissolve metal and flesh from a distance. They hidden in pools of toxic liquid and could fire their deadly secretions with perfect accuracy. But Hana realized they were ambush predators that relied on prey moving in predictable patterns, led the team in a seemingly random path that constantly changed direction and speed. The acid spitters kept missing their shots because they could not predict where their targets would be. The war party reached the extraction point without losing anyone, but when they arrived, they found something waiting for them that made even the Deep Folk warriors step back in fear. The extraction point was occupied by a void crawler, a creature so dangerous that even the Deep Folk normally avoided them. It was the size of a building with hide that seemed to absorb light. Tentacles moved with deadly precision, testing the air for the scent of prey. "This one has been waiting," Dreamkeeper said quietly. "It knows about the challenges. It feeds on the desperation of those who think they have survived." The Void Crawler was intelligent, malicious, and nearly impossible to kill. Traditional weapons were useless against something that size. Even the Deep Folk warriors, with all their combat experience, looked uncertain about how to proceed. Hana's extraction shuttle would arrive in less than an hour, but the creature showed no signs of moving. It had positioned itself perfectly to block any attempt to reach the landing zone. The massive predator had been planning this ambush as Hana studied the creature blocking her path to salvation. She realized that everything came down to this moment. All her preparation, all her careful planning, all her success with the Deep Folk meant nothing if she could not get past this final guardian. The Void Crawler was not just a predator, it was a test, the ultimate challenge that separated those who truly understood Deathward Prime from those who were just lucky enough to survive the night. Looking at the massive creature, Hana had an idea that was either brilliant or suicidal. Instead of fighting the Void Crawler, she was going to try something that no previous challenger had ever attempted. She was going to negotiate with it It was the most human thing she could do, and it would either save them all or get them killed in the most spectacular way possible. But as she prepared to face the ultimate predator of Deathward Prime, Hana knew that this was what being human really meant, taking impossible risks based on the crazy idea that even the most dangerous creatures could be reasoned with if you just understood what they really wanted. Hana stared at the massive void crawler blocking her path to the extraction point. The creature was like a living mountain of darkness, its hide seeming to swallow the light from Deathward Prime's harsh sun. Tentacles as thick as tree trunks moved through the air with deadly grace, testing for the scent of fear and desperation. The Deep Folk warriors had spread out in a defensive formation, but even Stonebreaker with his crystal weapons looked uncertain. Dreamkeeper was studying the creature. With the intensity of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle, that thing has been alive for centuries. Dreamkeeper said quietly, "It is not just a predator. It has intelligence and malice. It enjoys the hunt more than the kill." But Hana was watching the creature's behavior more carefully than anyone else had ever done. The void crawler was not moving randomly. Its positioning was deliberate, strategic. It had placed itself at the extraction point because it had learned that desperate beings made the most interesting prey. The creature was not hunting for food. She realized it was hunting for entertainment. Hana began walking forward alone toward the massive predator. The Deep Folk warriors called out warnings, but she ignored them. She carried something that no previous challenger had brought to Deathward Prime, a datapad filled with stories from across the galaxy. The void crawler's attention focused on her as she approached. Its tentacles writhed faster, tasting her scent, her fear, her determination. When she was close enough to see her reflection in its dark hide, Hana stopped and began to speak. "I know what you are," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the thin air. "You are not just a predator. You are a collector. You collect the last moments of those who think they have conquered this world." The creature's movements slowed slightly. It was listening. "You have watched 50 challengers die on this planet," Hana continued. "Each one thought they were strong enough to survive, but they all broke in the end. You fed on their desperation, their terror, their final realization that they had failed. One of the void crawlers, smaller tentacles reached toward her, stopping just short of touching distance. The appendage was testing, the air around her sampling the chemical traces of her emotions. "But I have something different to offer you," Hana said, holding up the datapad. "Something better than desperation. I have stories. Stories from 1,000 worlds. Tales of courage and love and adventure that you have never heard because you have been trapped on this one planet." The creature went completely still. Its massive form seemed to be considering her words. The tentacle that had been reaching toward her extended the rest of the way and gently touched the datapad. What happened next was unlike anything Hana had ever experienced. The void crawler was not just touching the device, it was interfacing with it somehow. Information flowed between them, not as words or images, but as pure concepts and emotions. The creature experienced in seconds the accumulated stories of human civilization, epic adventures from the frontier worlds, quiet love stories from peaceful colonies, tragic tales of loss and sacrifice, triumphant victories against impossible odds. For a being that had spent centuries consuming only fear and desperation, these stories were like water to someone dying of thirst. When the connection ended, the void crawler actually stepped aside, clearing the path to the extraction point. But it was not finished with them yet. With movements that seemed impossible for something so large, the creature began digging into the ground beneath its massive body. After several minutes, it pulled out objects that had been buried there for decades. Weapons, armor pieces, technology from across the galaxy. the personal effects of everyone who had died trying to survive on Deathworld Prime. The Void Crawler arranged these items in front of Hana like an offering, proof that she had not only survived, but had succeeded where all others had failed. It is giving you the trophies, Dreamkeeper said, his voice filled with awe. Proof.